Hey everybody, this is Miss Berry, and today we are going to go over section 1.1, which is called Getting Started, and this is all coming out of chapter 1, which is called Introduction to Statistics. Alright, so section 1.1, and really all of chapter 1, is just sort of an introduction to all of the vocabulary that we're going to be using throughout the semester. We're going to learn some general information about statistics, and then once we get into chapter 2, we'll actually start doing some calculations with numbers. So let's get started. Alright, so before we begin looking at some problems, let's talk about some important vocabulary. First, we have a population. You're going to hear that word a lot throughout the semester. A population, whenever we're in statistics, this is the group of interest in a study. All right, and this is going to change with every study that you look at. So every study, every survey, every research project is going to have a different population. So everyone who's doing research is interested in a different group of people, or different, it doesn't have to be people, it could be objects, could be cars, it could be plants, it could be animals. So it could even be, soil temperature. It doesn't have to be like a living thing. So the population is just, what are you interested in learning about here? All right, so a population is you want to think of it as like a big group. So it's the big group. If you're thinking about this like Venn diagram style, this is like the big circle. Maybe like you're a person who does research in health science, and the big group that you're interested in is people with lung cancer, let's say. All right, so the group of interest in the study is sort of like the most general statement of who are you interested in learning about. A parameter is a numerical description of the population. All right, so a parameter is a numerical description of the population. All right, and the way that I keep these straight in my head is that I remember that parameter is a description of the population, so they both start with P. All right, so we're going to see in just a minute, whenever we look at something that's called a statistic, that describes the sample. So parameter goes with population, sample goes with statistic. All right, so the P's go together, the S's go together. All right, so this might be like the average. Let's say that we're talking about, our population was people with lung cancer. All right, so if our population is people with lung cancer, an example of a parameter might be the average life expectancy of someone with lung cancer. All right, so maybe another parameter, let's think something besides the average, maybe the median. Whoa, I don't know what happened with that M there. Try that again. The median, let's say, income of people with lung cancer. We'll learn more about what the median is in the next chapter. I'm just giving you some examples of what a parameter might be. All right, so a parameter is just some kind of numerical description that has to do with the population specifically. All right, next we have a variable. A variable, this is going to be an easy definition to remember, because really the definition of the word variable is just something that changes, and that's what a variable is in statistic. It's a value that changes among members of the population. So each person, if we're talking about our people with lung cancer, so if our population is people with lung cancer, right, so our variable, we could have lots of different variables that we might look at. We might look at the age of the person, so the age at diagnosis, the age that they, start chemotherapy. Right, so lots of different ways to even look at age, so that could even be broken down even further. We might look at their gender. We might look at, are they a smoker? Right, so just we could go on and on and on and look at lots of different variables, but I just want to stop right here and just show you what types of different variables we can have. Age, that would be a number, right? Right, gender and whether or not they're a smoker, these are not numbers. Right, so we can have variables that are numbers, and we can have variables that are not numbers. So we're using the word value here just really loosely, right? So when I'm saying value, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're talking about a number. This could be what we call a categorical variable, which is something that's not a number, so a variable that's not a number. All right, so a variable is just going to be some value that's changing among the members of our population. All right, next we have our data. Right, you probably hear the word data or data, it doesn't matter how you want to say it. You shouldn't take advice from me on how to pronounce things. I'm definitely not the expert. But the data is the actual information that you collect. Right, so that's the stuff that you're typing in the Excel spreadsheet. So when you think about data, I want you to think about that like Excel spreadsheet. I'm sure we've all seen an Excel spreadsheet. So we have like some big table, and we are typing in our data. So maybe this first column is our age. And so if we're talking about, again, our people with lung cancer, maybe we're looking at like 25, 27, 36, 54. All right, so the data is the actual numbers that we're typing into the Excel spreadsheet. All right. A census, this is kind of a random vocabulary word that's been thrown in here, but I will go ahead and cover it. All right, a census is a special type of survey. So it's a special type of survey. And this is very rare that you can actually do this, but it's a special type of survey where you collect data from every member of the population. Right, so imagine like our population we've been talking about, people with lung cancer. Imagine how hard it would be to survey every single person in the whole world that has lung cancer. This would be almost impossible, right? So this is a very rare circumstance where you can complete a census. Probably the most common one that you've maybe heard about before is the U.S. Census. And I feel like the last time they did that was maybe 2020. So you may remember that from a few years ago. And that's where they go door to door. I want to say that, like, the door to door part is like sort of their last ditch effort to get the data from everyone. But they send out stuff in the mail. They ask you to answer all these questions. How many people live in your household? How many children are there? how many people that are not your children live there. So all kinds of different questions they ask you. And they send this to every household in the United States. So this is a very rare type of survey. It's very expensive to conduct. They have to send out all these people to collect all this data, and it takes a long time, so it's expensive. It's time consuming, and it's very difficult to collect data from everyone in your population. So this is a pretty rare occurrence. You're not going to see a census very often. Okay. All right. Now, we've been talking about a population. We've talked about how it is pretty hard to be able to survey everyone in your population. And so what we normally do is we'll choose a sample of our population. A sample is some kind of representative subset of the population. All right, so if we have our big circle is people with lung cancer. Maybe our sample is this smaller circle, our sample. Maybe you go to some big hospital, let's say like the Emory in Atlanta. And maybe they're doing some kind of study on people with lung cancer. Maybe you can survey, I don't know, 100 people that are being treated at Emory. All right, so when we say representative, whoops, I don't know what I just did. Somehow I deleted all that. Okay, there we go. All right, so when we say representative, what that means is that you don't want to just go and survey, maybe you don't want to survey like 10 women that have lung cancer, right? Then you're leaving out all of the men that have lung cancer. So you want to choose a representative sample. So that means, you want to have a diverse sample, lots of different ages, lots of different genders, lots of different, socioeconomic backgrounds. All right, so you want to choose a representative subset. This is kind of a fancy word, but a subset is just like this smaller circle that's within a larger circle. So think of these as sets. All right, so if you think of these as sets, then the larger circle, our population, that's our set, and then the smaller circle is our subset. All right, so this is, it doesn't have to be 100, so I said 100 here. It doesn't have to be 100. There are lots of different ways to determine, like, how many people should I survey. You can look at other research that's being done in your field, and you can see how many people are they including in their samples. And there's also like predetermined little formulas that you can use, and we'll learn about those as we get into the semester. So there's little formulas that you can use to determine like a recommendation for how many people you should survey. All right, so a sample is just a subset of the population that we choose to represent the larger population as a whole. All right, and then our very last vocabulary word, a sample statistic. Well, I say last, the last one for right now. The last one in this little section is a sample statistic. A sample statistic is a numerical description of the sample. All right, so just like a parameter was a numerical description of the population, a statistic is a numerical description of the sample. All right, so numerical description of the sample. All right, numerical description of the sample. All right, so again, this could be, you know, the age of onset of lung cancer of our sample. This could be the gender of the people in our sample. This could be the, you know, annual income of the people in our sample. So lots of different things that we could use to describe our population, or excuse me, use to describe our sample. All right, we have two more little definitions, and then we're going to get into some questions. So let's get through these next two definitions, and then if you need to pause the video and take a break, that would be a good time to pause for a minute. All right, so we have two branches of statistics, and we'll spend about half the semester in the descriptive statistics. So this will be like pre-midterm and then post-midterm. And when I'm saying midterm, I don't mean like a test. I'm just saying like the middle of the term, the middle of the semester. So we won't have an actual midterm in this class. When I say midterm, I'm just referring to the midway point of the semester. All right, so descriptive statistics, you can probably, once you see the definition, you'll be like, okay, that makes total sense. Descriptive statistics, this is just describing your data. This is where you're gathering your data, you're summarizing your data, and that means like typing it into the Excel spreadsheet, figuring out what's the average, what's the median, what's the mode. So you're gathering, summarizing, and displaying data. All right, so displaying means like creating graphs. Summarizing means, you know, coming up with those numerical descriptions of your data. And then gathering, of course, that's the actual action of completing the survey or conducting the survey. All right, inferential statistics. This is where you're using the descriptive statistics to generalize. Whoa, that was a hard one. To generalize to the population. So you're using the descriptive statistics specifically from the sample.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Sorry, Siri thought I was talking to her. Oh my gosh, that scared me to death. Okay, so inferential statistics is where you are using the descriptive statistics from your sample to generalize to the population. So maybe you're saying, okay, well, I did my survey of my 100 patients with lung cancer from Emory, and I found that the average age of onset was 46. Right, so I'm going to say that on average, for people in the United States, the average age of onset of lung cancer is 46 years old. Right, so I'm using my data that I collected from my sample to make a generalization about the population, which is all people with lung cancer. All right, so like I said, if you need to take a little break, now would be a good time. We're going to get into some actual questions from the homework next. So if you want to pause and take a little break and come back in a few minutes, now is a good time to stop and come back. Our first question says, determine whether the statement describes a population or a sample. So part A, looking at part A, the high school GPAs of all 32, that's supposed to say head coaches in the NFL. Whoops. Head coaches. Oh my gosh. Alright, I'm going to get it this time. Oop, okay. Head coaches. The high school GPAs of all 32 head coaches in the NFL. Right, so since this is our survey, our study would be encompassing all of the head coaches in the NFL, this is going to be a population. Now, if it said something like the high school GPA of 12 of the head coaches in the NFL, right, that would be a sample, but we're talking about all 32 head coaches that are in the NFL. So since we're surveying every one of them, that would be the population. Part B says the heights of 14 out of the 31 tomato plants at Mr. Lando's greenhouse. All right, so since we're just looking at a portion or a subset of all of the tomato plants, this is going to be a sample. All right, so we're just sampling 14 of the 31 total tomato plants. All right, so a sample is where we're just looking at a subset. All right, the next one says, looking at C, the number of hours a group of 12 children in Mrs. Smith's kindergarten class sleep in a day. The key word here is a group of. All right, so it looks like here the way that they've worded this is just a portion of the children that are in Mrs. Smith's kindergarten class. So since we're just looking at a group of some of the children, this would be a sample. All right, and then lastly, the ages of a sample of 37 parents of your classmates. All right, so this one includes the word sample, so obviously it's a sample. All right, so some keywords to look out for, I would say the word all, out of, a group of, and sample. All right, all good words to look out for that are going to indicate whether you're looking at a population or a sample. Right, next, we are identifying the population that's being studied in parts A, B, C, and D. All right, so I've got them copied down here. All right, the population, we said that part A was referring to the population, so the high school GPAs of all 32 head coaches in the NFL, our population is just the head coaches in the NFL. So that's the group of interest in our study. We're looking at NFL head coaches. All right, part B, the heights of 14 out of the 31 tomato plants at Mr. Lando's greenhouse. All right, so what are we interested in studying? The group of interest in our study, that's going to be our 31 tomato plants. So our population is going to be our 31 tomato plants. Whoa, that was like really close together. At Mr. Lando's greenhouse. All right, so the group of interest in our study, or you could even say all of the tomato plants. That might be even a little bit more general. You could say all of the tomato plants at Mr. Lando's greenhouse. That's even more general. All right, and then part C, the number of hours a group of 12 children that are in Mrs. Smith's kindergarten class sleep in a day. All right, so the population, the group that we're interested in studying here, that's going to be all of the children that are in Miss Smith's kindergarten class. All right, so we'll say all children. All children in Miss Smith's kindergarten class. All right, and then last one, I want you to think about this one for a minute. The ages of, all right, that's our variable, the age, that's our variable. The age of a sample of 37 parents of your classmates. So who are we interested in here? Not your classmates, but who? Their parents, right? So all of your classmates' parents. All of your classmates' parents. Okay. All right, so whenever you're looking at the population, you want to read the description and then think about, okay, who am I interested in studying here? What is my group of interest? All right, so the population is the group of interest. All right. Number 3 says, identify the sample chosen for parts B, C, and D. All right, so for part B, the sample chosen for the heights of 14 out of the 31 tomato plants in Mr. Lando's greenhouse, the sample was those 14 plants that we measured the height of. So the 14 plants that you measured the height of. All right, the actual sample itself is those 14 plants. All right, the rest of that is just kind of giving us some context. All right, and then for the next one, our sample, the number of hours that a group of 12 children in Mrs. Smith's kindergarten class sleep in a day. All right, so our sample was those 12 children. And again, you could provide some context there. You could say the 12 children who were chosen for the sample, or the 12 children who slept that day, but 12 children is more than enough. That is plenty. All right, and then the last one, looking for our sample, the ages of a sample of 37 parents of your classmates. All right, so our sample was those 37 parents that we got the ages of. All right, so our sample was those 37 parents that were surveyed. We are almost done. All right, this is just a little bit of extra information. This might be something that you want to add to your formula sheet as we get closer to test time. When we're talking about the population, that's the whole group, whereas the sample is part of the group. The population is the group that we want to know about. The sample is the group that we do know about. This is the group that we can survey and ask questions and find out information about. All right, remember the numerical descriptions of our population are called parameters. Remember, the way we're remembering this is parameters go with the population. The numerical descriptions of the sample are called the statistics. All right, so the P's match and the S's match. And in general, our population parameters are typically unknown. All right, and that's because we can't survey everyone in the population normally. So for most situations, we will never know the actual value of those population parameters, but we can estimate them using the sample statistics. All right, so we can always estimate them using the sample statistics because we can gather that data and calculate those sample statistics. And then for the population, the parameters are fixed. That means those numerical descriptions, those are a fixed number, but generally, like I said, we don't know them. And then for a sample, your sample statistics are going to change based on your sample. So if you survey 30 people today and ask them what their age is, so maybe you go out to the sidewalk at the college, survey 30 people, find out their average age. If you do that tomorrow, survey another 30 people, that might change. Their average age might change. So the sample statistics or the numerical descriptions of the sample are going to change based on who your sample is. All right, and then number 4 says, our last question about population parameters and sample statistics, determine if the numerical value describes a population parameter or a sample statistic. All right, so the numerical value, we can see for part A, that's the numerical value. And then for, let's see, for part B, we've got 2 values, so we'll highlight both and then figure out which one we're supposed to be looking at when we get there. Let's look at part A. 63% of all freshmen at CCGA live on campus. All right, we see that word all. That's one of our key words that sort of lets us know that we're looking at a population. Right, so we would say that 63% there, that's a numerical description of the population. So it's a population parameter. All right, and then part B, a recent poll of 1,443 corporate lawyers showed that the average price of their cars is $98,900. All right, so these numbers, do you think that this is talking about a sample or a population? They're talking about 1,443 corporate lawyers. Do you think that's all of the corporate lawyers in the whole world? Definitely not, right? There's definitely more than 1,443 corporate lawyers in the world. So this would be a sample. All right, so we're looking at a sample statistic. So you basically just read over the statement, figure out, am I talking about a population or a sample? And that's going to tell you if you're looking at a parameter or a statistic. All right, and then last question. Determine whether the statement describes a descriptive or inferential statistic. So remember, descriptive statistics, this is going to be, sorry, I've lost my paper. There it is. This is descriptive statistics. This is where you are gathering, summarizing, displaying data. Summarizing and displaying data. And then inferential statistics, this is where you are taking the descriptive statistics, taking those numbers, and then using them to generalize, say to make generalizations, about the population. Right, so descriptive statistics, that's where you are gathering, summarizing, and displaying data. And then inferential statistics, that's where you're taking those descriptive statistics and you're using them to make generalizations about your larger population. All right, so number 1, 75% of all CCGA students voted in the last presidential election. All right, so this is just a numerical description. All right, so we just have a numerical description there of our data set. So this is just where we are summarizing some of our data. So this would just be descriptive statistics. If you could make this into an inferential statistics problem by saying like in a recent survey, it was determined that 75% of all CCGA students voted in the last presidential election. So we predict that 75% of all college students voted in the last election. Right? So that way you'd be generalizing to a larger population. All right, part B says a recent poll of 2,883 homeowners in Brunswick showed that the average price of a house in Glenn County is $321,000. All right, so we polled 2,883 homeowners in Brunswick, and then we're saying, okay, based on that poll, we think the average price of a house in Glenn County is $321,000. All right, so this is an example of inferential statistics. All right, so you're taking the results from a sample, and then we're generalizing that to a larger population. We're saying the average price of a house in Glenn County. All right, so we're generalizing our sample data, or our sample statistic, you could say, to a larger population, which is all houses in Glenn County. So this would be an example of inferential statistics, taking your data and then using it to make generalizations about a larger population. All right, so descriptive statistics, you're just reporting information about a sample. Inferential statistics, you're using those sample statistics to make generalizations about a larger population. All right, so that has given you a short little overview of the vocabulary that we're going to be seeing throughout the semester, as well as an idea of what kind of work we'll be doing. You know, like I said, we'll be doing descriptive statistics before midterm, and then after midterm we'll do inferential statistics. So now you have a little bit of an idea of what's to come. And in the next section, we're going to be talking about sampling methods, you know, before you know it, we'll be all the way through chapter 1. This is a short chapter. So I'll see you guys in the next video.